special guests and friends of the Museum of Russian Culture, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this special meeting timed to coincide with the 100th anniversary of the arrival at San Francisco Bay at Angel Island of 526 Russian refugees. In a sense, today's event can be traced back to June of 2013, when Eugenia Bailey, a good friend of our museum, whose parents, Paul and Mary Nikonenko, made the journey on the US Army Transport Merritt, decided to organize a memorial event in commemoration of the 90th anniversary of that journey at the immigration station on Angel Island. Unfortunately, the turnout on that occasion was quite small. Eugenia, a friend of hers, and I laid a memorial wreath of flowers on the waters. For many years, Eugenia Bailey had tried to collect and preserve any materials that she could find about those who took part in the last campaign of the Siberian flotilla, from Vladivostok through Korea, China, and the Philippines, and on May 25, 1923, sailed to San Francisco on board the USAT Merritt. On June 18, 2018, in anticipation of the 95th anniversary of the Merritt's arrival, our museum devoted the 31st meeting of friends of our museum to this event. At that time, there were 4 very interesting presentations. I spoke about the Siberian flotilla and the role of Rear Admiral Yuri Karlovich Stark in organizing the evacuation of the flotilla, its men and their families, from Vladivostok to the Philippines. Eugenia Bailey's presentation was devoted to the voyage of the USAT Merritt from the Philippines to San Francisco. Maria Sakovich focused her talk on the admission of the refugees to Angel Island and finding help for them in San Francisco. And then Olga Kachina covered the acclimatization of the refugees to life in the United States. It should also be pointed out that our colleague Lada Tremsina published a 4-part article in Russian Life newspaper, which was entitled The Long Journey from Golden Horn Bay in Vladivostok to the Golden Gate. 2019 proved to be a busy year for myself and my friend Amir Hissamuddinov, a historian from Vladivostok. We set about compiling a biographical reference book in Russian devoted to the USAT Merritt's passengers, entitled From Vladivostok to San Francisco, The Fate and Journey of 526 Odysseus. This book was issued as an e-book by the Russian Northeast Asia collection at Hamilton Library of the University of Hawaii. Using documents held at the National Archives and Records Administration, we attempted to collect and summarize the most disparate information available in American archives, electronic resources, periodicals, and published memoirs. This book contains the names of those who arrived in the United States on the Merritt, including variant spellings of their names in Russian and English, their age at the time of landing, date and place of birth, marital status, professional information relating to military service, occupation in the U.S., their dates of death and places of burial. The book is illustrated portraits, materials from immigration documents, as well as photographs of graves. October 25th of last year marked the 100th anniversary of the effective end of the Russian Civil War in the Russian Far East and the start of the first part of the harrowing journey full of uncertainties and tribulation undertaken by Russian refugees on the eve of the fall of Vladivostok to the Bolsheviks and in the coming months. Our museum, in conjunction with the Congress of Russian Americans, held a special meeting and a memorial service officiated by Bishop Theodosius of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. Since 2013, our museum has continued an active search for new materials for our collections related to the USAT Merritt and its passengers. Their destinies were different. Some became professors, others movers and shakers of the newly emerging Russian community in San Francisco, while others never rose to prominence in any particular field. Unfortunately, not much has been preserved about these people. We were most fortunate that in April of 2021, William R. Cast, the trustee of the documents and photographs of several related families who had traveled on the Merritt, contacted our museum and offered them to us. Mr. Cast is the great-grandson of Colonel Andrei Ivanovich Kolosoff, the grandson of Kolosoff's daughter Kira and her husband, Lieutenant Vladislav Kazimirovich Sintitsky. Towards the end of 2021, Pat Gridyagin, the granddaughter of Vasily Gridyagin, contacted us and provided his biographical information and scans of two of his photographs, one in naval uniform and one in civilian dress. Our colleague Lada Tremsina has done a great job organizing, describing, and scanning the unique materials Mr. Cast has sent us. They will be of great interest to scholars of pre-revolutionary Russia, the Russian Civil War in the Russian Far East, and the Russian immigration in the Asia-Pacific region. In April of last year, Lada made use of these materials in her article, Lieutenant Colonel Andrei Ivanovich Kolosoff, based on the archival collection of William Cast, which appeared in Russian Life in 8 parts during April of 2022. Our museum offers its heartfelt thanks to Mr. Cast for his generous donation and also expresses its gratitude to Pat Gridyagin as well as to Nik Danilov and Sandra Pushkin for providing scans of photographs for use in one of the posters for today's event. We are very pleased that today Maria Sakovich will present her talk entitled The USAT Merritt Refugee Emigrants in Broader Context. This will be followed by Lada Tremsina's talk, From Vladivostok to San Francisco, the journey of the extended Kolosoff family. Thank you for coming. In conclusion, it is worth noting that several Siberian flotilla officers who traveled on the USAT Merritt were among the founding members of the Association of Former Russian Naval Officers in San Francisco in 1925. We have a small collection of documents and photographs of the association as well as journals that it published. It is significant to note that veterans of the Siberian flotilla participated together with other organizations and members of the local Russian community in the Diamond Jubilee Parade, which was held in San Francisco in 1925. Thank you again for your attention. Maria?
I'm going to scrunch down because Yves summarized very well the contributions of Eugenia Bailey. She's sort of the mover and shaker of the commemorations as they have taken place. Not only were her parents, Pavel Vasilyevich and Maria Vasilyevna, among the Merritt's passengers, but so was Eugenia in utero. And Yves did a good job of summarizing the various commemorations that have not only taken place, but have inspired several of us to dig deeper into this history and encourage descendants to save photographs and documents. We celebrate a few months early, Eugenia, your 100th birthday. That will be in November. Pretty remarkable. Between 1920 and 1941, several thousand, we don't have precise numbers, 10,000, 12,000, maybe more, refugee immigrants from the former Russian Empire arrived on the west coast of the United States. The 526 passengers of the Merritt were part of this post-Bolshevik revolution and Civil War diaspora. that sent citizens to Europe, to China, North America, Australia, and New Zealand. The arrival of the Merritt coincided with a period of closing doors in America to immigrants, especially those from Russia, other parts of Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, and the Middle East. In 1921, Congress enacted the quota law. It came into being in 3 parts. The quota for 1921-22 didn't particularly affect refugee immigrants from Russia because for the most part they were either still en route in Siberia or they were in Harbin contemplating what was next in their lives. The numbers for 1923-24 decreased by 10,000, began creating problems at the Angel Island Immigration Station during the summer of 1923, and I will talk about that later. When the new law went into full effect on the 1st of July 1924, the numbers, as you see, dropped precipitously, and this quota lasted until 1952. Fortunately, the trip of the Merritt had been carefully planned. The refugees could have been sent earlier in March or in April, but the quota for Russia was maxed out. The timing of the ship's arrival was calculated to make sure that everyone aboard would be able to be admitted. Although the Merritt arrived on the 30th of June, the ship did not dock until the next day. July 1st was the beginning of the federal fiscal year. And the quotas were divided into 12 months so that, as you'll see later, a quota, as it did with the Merritt, fill up very quickly for the whole month, even in the first day or two. During these 20 years when people from Russia, refugee immigrants from Russia, were arriving in the United States, there was no consideration for refugee status. There was no legal, as there is today, refugee status. They were simply considered as immigrants. They were subject to the quotas, to the immigration laws, and to the public health regulations. The passengers of the Merritt, however, did receive special treatment, especially in the Philippines, and to a lesser extent during their inspections at Angel Island. There they were housed not in the immigration station, but about a 15-minute walk away in the Army's Fort McDowell. A possible field trip someday. What was unique during these 20 years of the arrival of the Russian diaspora was that the United States government enabled special considerations and financial support, especially in the Philippines, which was at this time an American colony. The Governor General of the Philippines, Leonard Wood, provided asylum for these refugees, and it turned out to be approximately 4 months. When he realized that this many people could not be economically integrated into the local economy, he enlisted the help of the U.S. Secretaries of State, War, the Secretary of Labor, which implemented the immigration laws, and ultimately to President Harding, who gave permission for these people to be admitted, but only under the quota law. The local branch of the American Red Cross in the Philippines contributed at least $10,000 to feeding and housing the future Merritt people for those 4 months. The Red Cross headquarters in Washington, D.C. was directed by the Secretary of War to cover transportation costs, which came to about $30,000 to the United States. I think this was special treatment. The examination by immigration inspectors and the public health physicians at Angel Island was the last step in this very long, arduous, sad journey. For most of them, it went quite smoothly. Even though the U.S. officials in the Philippines had tried to make sure that everybody complied with all of the regulations, at least 31 individuals had to appear before boards of special inquiry. These boards were simply 3 immigration inspectors who further probed into what they were worried about with the individuals. Just for example, thank you. The Zon family, actually from Zon, managed to arrive without visas, and they were not the only ones. I don't know how the officials missed that one. They spent 10 days at Angel Island and were finally admitted under parole. Parole is a status that allows people to resume their lives, but they're under the constant watch of the Immigration Service and can be recalled at any particular time. 4 individuals were sent back, that is, they were excluded from entry. 2 concessions were made during the immigration inspections. One was that the literacy requirement was waived. The literacy requirement hadn't come into law until 1917. There were many refugees from the Eastern Front of the war, from Russia, who arrived in San Francisco during the war. They were unable to read and write, and they were excluded by the inspectors. Most of them, however, appealed their cases. The literacy requirement for the Merritt had a little interesting twist. That is, their waiving of the literacy requirement on the grounds that if the refugees returned, they faced religious persecution. Doesn't really matter, it's just an interesting footnote. They were allowed to come in despite their not being able to read and write. This is there were 17 individuals, which isn't a whole big number, but compared to all of the other refugee immigrants from Russia, it was very unusual to have any who couldn't pass the literacy test, because most of the people leaving Russia were upper and middle class citizens of the empire. The other concession is that they waived the LPC clause, likely to become a public charge. Immigration officials were deathly afraid of anybody becoming a public charge. This was used very extensively for all immigrants trying to come into the United States. And there's even a section on the passenger manifest. Do you have $50 with you? I didn't look at every single manifest in preparation for this talk during the week, but almost everybody says no. That would have been a matter for likely for the BSI, the group of 3 inspectors. Like most of the refugee immigrants from the former Russian Empire during this time, the Merritt passengers had to start working right away. The Russian Relief Society of America from New York was an organization primarily of Americans who were helping those who had been evacuated to Constantinople and allowed to come to the United States. They sent out a Russian-speaking American to help them find work, and the community chest extended his time on the West Coast, or at least in San Francisco, by providing some of his salary. Other places that offered help, the local International Institute, next picture, Holy Trinity Cathedral, where the rector, my grandfather, Father Vladimir Sakovich, helped to organize parish life that showed care and concern for the amelioration of life of those newly arriving. These are the words of Bishop Theophilus in 1923. The church activities included fundraising, providing an address for the newly arrived. It functioned as a little post office for a while, news of jobs and housing, a library, a reading room, and the very hands-on help of Father Vladimir. I quote somebody, if anybody wanted to know something, it would be said, see Father Sakovich. He provided translation, he accompanied timid job seekers to potential job sites, he listened with an understanding ear, he provided good advice, he was well connected with the American community. One newcomer noted how accessible he was, how unpretentious, warm, responsive, and sensitive to another's woes or sorrows. Of course, he performed the church rites for baptism, marriage, and death, not only in San Francisco, but throughout the Bay Area and California. All in all, the church represented perhaps the only piece of the refugees' former life to have survived, and this in itself was a form of consolation. I mentioned earlier about the Merritt passengers getting in under the quota, but those coming from Russia who arrived on the 12th and the 15th of July couldn't enter the United States because the quota had been used up. Some of these 150 passengers appealed the ruling and took their cases to court, but they lost and had to remain at the immigration station in the hope for a kind of favorable resolution. Others, at the suggestion of the San Francisco Commissioner of Immigration, returned to Yokohama and came back to San Francisco for the September quota. The cost of one of their trips would have been covered by the steamship company. It was just a lot of time on the Pacific Ocean. The group who chose to wait, and it turned out to be 3 months, were finally admitted, not by a change in the law, but by the 1923 September 1st earthquake that leveled Tokyo and Yokohama. The immigration officials realized that they could not send people back to the devastation of that earthquake, which killed approximately 140,000 people. Like many thousands of refugee immigrants from the Russian Empire landing on the West Coast, many, we have no idea. Many of these passengers did not talk about their ordeal of flight and resettlement in a foreign land. Many descendants in California have known little or nothing. One of Eugenia's contributions, of course, as summarized by Yves, is the accumulation, finally, of documents, photographs, so that we have a better understanding of how people felt, what they endured, what they experienced. And my final sentence for my talk is, in addition to Eugenia Bailey's call to research, the Museum of Russian Culture has been collecting documents and photographs, allowing us to understand what is both unique to the Merritt and what is common to all within the diaspora. Thank you.
If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you so much for coming here. I'm sorry, my English is not as good as of the previous speakers, but I will try my best. So my topic is from Vladivostok to San Francisco, the journey of the extended Kolosoff family. And I wanted to show this voyage, this journey, this flight, through the story of one particular family, which was quite remarkable. So as Yves Franquien already mentioned, we are really indebted to William Cust, who donated his unique collection of materials from his extended family in 2021. And my presentation today is mainly based on the materials of this collection. And I'm really glad that the brother of William Cust, Michael Cust, and his wife Rebecca are today with us as our guests. Thank you very much for coming. So at the time of evacuation from Russia, there were 10 members of the Kolosoff family. The father, Andrei Ivanovich Kolosoff, 52, was an officer in the rank of lieutenant colonel of the Admiralty. His wife, Maria Leontievna Yevdokimova, was 45, and there were 8 children with them, 5 girls and 3 boys, ranging in age between 11 and 24. 2 elder daughters, Iya and Kira, were already married to the officers serving on the Siberian flotilla too. There was also a little granddaughter, Marina, Kira's daughter, who was only 1 year and 8 months at the time of evacuations. So she was a real hero. And many years later, Marina Svensitsky and then Marina Cust, she was the granddaughter who was mostly interested in the story of her family, and she was gathering materials together with her husband William Cust, and did a lot of research into the story, and they even prepared 2 brochures, kind of typescripts for books, which were never published, but these present for us really valuable material. And I will use much of that material in my presentation. So now a short account of the family history. Andrei Kolosoff was born in 1870 in a village in the Nizhny Novgorod province, where his father served as a deacon and later became a priest. His parents are in this photo, his father and his mom, later on in 1897. So in 1892, Andrei graduated from the Kazan Infantry Military School. In Kazan, he met his future wife, Maria Yevdokimovna, who was born in Kazan in 1877. Andrei and Maria married in 1896. Soon after, they had to relocate to Vladivostok in the far eastern province of Russia, since Kolosoff was transferred to the newly forming infantry regiment at the Vladivostok fortress. So in this picture we see the officers of the infantry regiment at the Vladivostok fortress, which was formed in 1896. And so here is Andrei Ivanovich and his wife Maria Leontievna, and so the comrades and the wife of this officer 7. So in the summer of 1896, the young couple started their family life in the far eastern province of Russia, called Primorye, or Maritime Territory. In 1898, their first child, daughter Iya, was born. So this photo was taken around 1900. Andrei Ivanovich was a lieutenant or poruchik at this time. During the Russo-Japanese War, Kolosoff continued to serve in the Vladivostok fortress, which was declared under siege, including during the bombing of it by the Japanese fleet on February 22, 1904. In May of 1904, Kolosoff was transferred from infantry to the Navy. In 1905, he was promoted for his distinguished service to the rank of captain. In 1906, Andrei Ivanovich was transferred to a new place of service, the port city Nikolaevsk on Amur, about 800 miles north from Vladivostok. So the family spent the next 4 years there, while Kolosoff was serving on ships on the Amur River. The Kolosoff family was growing. This photo with 6 children was taken in 1910. In this year, 1910, Kolosoff was transferred back to Vladivostok and continued his service in the Siberian naval crew. So this is one of the old photo postcards of Vladivostok of Admiral's Wharf back in 1910s. So Kolosoff was assigned to join the Siberian naval crew, and subsequently he held various posts in the Vladivostok fortress and Vladivostok port. In 1913, Kolosoff was promoted to the rank of the lieutenant colonel of the Admiralty. In Russian, it's подполковник по Адмиралтейству. This photo of him and his son Igor was taken around that year. Igor will later go to study in the Naval Academy. During the First World War, Kolosoff continued his service in Vladivostok. Then the time of trouble began. So when in the spring of 1917, the power in Vladivostok was taken by the Bolsheviks, several officers who were serving in Vladivostok were sent to Petrograd. And at that time, it was kind of saving them, perhaps, during the time when many sailors were kind of trying to get rid of the officers. So he was in the Petrograd area in Finland, which is now Finland, on the north shore of the Finnish Bay, Finnish Bay. And here he is in the cap of a naval officer during the period of the provisional government when he served in this area in 1917. So then, when the Bolsheviks took power in Petrograd, he was discharged from the Navy and was declared the former officer. So he left for Vladivostok and returned to his family. During this period of 1917-1921, there was a series of coups in Vladivostok, changes of white and pink power, which is neither white, neither red. In this rapidly changing political environment, Andrei Ivanovich was often assigned new appointments. According to his service record, during this period he served on 6 different ships in Vladivostok. In May of 1921, the power of anti-Bolshevik pre-Amur government was established, and Rear Admiral Stark was appointed as a commander of the Siberian flotilla operating from Vladivostok. This photo shows ships of the Siberian flotilla in the port of Vladivostok. I'm not really good at any kind of expertise in ships, but yeah, I just can show you the photo without specifying the ship, what the ships are and what types of ships they are. So one of them, the second from left, is gunboat Boyki, on which Kolosoff served for some period in 1921. The first of the Kolosoff daughters to marry was 18-year-old Kira. In May 1920, she married a young midshipman, or michman in Russian, Vyacheslav Vlada Kazimirovich Svinsitsky. In February of 1921, their daughter Marina was born, the first grandchild of Andrei Ivanovich and Maria Leontievna Kolosoff. Vyacheslav Kazimirovich Svinsitsky was born in the Ufa district in 1896. He was the son of a hereditary nobleman. He graduated from gymnasia, and then in early 1918 he graduated from the special midshipman classes in Petrograd as a senior Garda-Marine. Since November 1918, he served in the Siberian flotilla in Vladivostok including the messenger ship Patrokol in 1920. So here is the photo of this Patrokol, which was also used as a training ship for the cadets of the naval school in Vladivostok. So all these photos are from the William Cast collection. Apparently they were preserved by Svinsitsky, his grandfather, and these are really, really rare and unique photos. So this photo shows the crew of the ship Patrokol, and Lada, Vyacheslav Kazimirovich Svinsitsky is here.
Что за женщина?
We don't know, sorry. We don't know anybody else in this photo, unfortunately. So we don't only know that is, yeah. Unfortunately, don't know. So the eldest son of the Kolosoffs, Igor, attended the naval school in Vladivostok. Part of the program was the training of the cadets on the gunboat Magnet. In the summer of 1922, by order of the commander of the Siberian flotilla, Rear Admiral Stark, Magnet took off for a voyage to Kamchatka and further north. I'm very glad that not long ago I met a person whose father was also on this gunboat Magnet, and his whole family came to San Francisco on merit. I'm not sure if he's here. So this is Boris. I'm very glad that Boris came. So Boris kindly shared with me many photos from his collection. And so these two photos show some scenes from the voyage of Magnet to Kamchatka, to Petropavlovsk on Kamchatka, and they actually traveled further north to Chukotka and even to Nome in Alaska in 1922. So this is Petropavlovsk on Kamchatka scene from the bay, and these are the officers of this Magnet, including the captain Dreyer, and also there is a guest who came on ship. He is actually Wittenberg, an American who was doing business in Petropavlovsk, Kamchatka at the time. So he was apparently visiting the gunboat at this point. During the voyage of Magnet, Igor Kolosoff made friends with Lieutenant Michael Podimatopola. In 1923, later he will marry Igor's sister, Leah Kolosoff, and he will become a member of the Kolosoff clan. So, as I can understand, this is Michael Podimatopola, and these are officers and cadets on Magnet in 1922. And also, when I was looking at this photo, I also think that Arkady Didenko, the father of Boris Didenko, is in here. I'm not sure if Boris agrees with me, but I'm comparing with other photos, I would say it's him. By the fall of 1922, the maritime province and its main city, Vladivostok, had remained the last stronghold of the anti-Bolshevik struggle of the White forces. However, on October 15, 1922, General Dietrichs, the ruler of the Priamur territory, had to issue Order Number 52 on the cessation of military actions. So preparations for evacuation began. As written in the service record of Andrei Kolosoff, he left Vladivostok on the gunboat battery, under the command of Captain First Rank Petrovsky, as part of the flotilla of Rear Admiral Stark, right before the Red Army entered Vladivostok. 2 cabins were allocated for the large Kolosoff family on Batareya. One of them for Maria Leontievna and her daughters Leah, Militsa, Natalia, and Kira with her little daughter Marina. The eldest son of the Kolosoff, Igor, had not yet returned from Kamchatka on Magnet. Kolosoff family recollections, recorded later by Marina Kast and her husband William, show us that those last days in Russia were a time of confusion and despair. Andrei Ivanovich Kolosoff did not believe in the need of evacuation, and Captain Second Rank Chuknin, his son-in-law, the husband of Iya at the time, had to strongly persuade him to get ready for his journey. Kira Andreevna recalled how she ran along the empty street of Vladivostok to say goodbye to her friend before they parted forever. So then I will be using a few pictures which were drawn by Marina Kast and her husband William Kast for their typescript, which was meant to be a book, sometime probably, Strike Ensigns, which they did in 1998. So they tried to depict the way, the journey of the flotilla. So according to the report of Rear Admiral Stark, the Siberian flotilla left Vladivostok by the evening of October 24, 1922. On October 25th, Vladivostok was taken by the Red Forces. Then the ships went to the little port of, not little, just port of Pasiet, which is south of Vladivostok, close to the border with Korea. Stark wrote that he had to evacuate around 10,000 people, and they had the ships which they were not quite big. They were not ocean steamships. They were mainly used for the Coast Guard in Vladivostok. Andrei Kolosoff later wrote, all ships were so overloaded with troops and civil refugees that it was impossible not only to lie on the decks, but even to walk. For example, on Bataria, in addition to about 10 crew members, of which almost half had families, there were about 400 to 500 people led by General Glebov and about 70 horses. In Pasiet, many private passengers and some troops unloaded and proceeded to Korea on foot. On October 28, 1922, 24 overloaded ships left Pasiet. These people were leaving their native land forever. Kolosoff wrote, after staying for 2 days in Pasiet, on a foggy morning, the flotilla set off to the south. The next day, the flotilla arrived at a small Korean port. And a day later, the flotilla set off for the port of Kinzan. It's here. Also, when the flotilla was leaving Vladivostok, they telegraphed to Magnit in Petropavlovsk, and they said to evacuate immediately without coming to Vladivostok. So these are again photos from the collection of Boris Didenko. So they show us these photos had inscriptions on the back, which is quite helpful. So they show us the evacuation of Magnit from Petropavlovsk from Kamchatka on November 2nd, 1922. So this one is the last motorboat. So apparently coming from the town to the ship. And second photo shows the steamship Sishan. So together with Magnit, there was the steamship of the Russian commercial fleet, which was called Voluntary Fleet, Dobrovolny Flot, and one of the steamships, Sishan, was in Petropavlovsk at the time. So they went together on a voyage, and they made a first stop in Hakodate, Japan, and then they joined the flotilla in the port of Ginzan. En route to Ginzan, they got into a strong typhoon. The main mast of Magnit was broken, and the wire of a wireless telegraph was wound around the propeller. but somehow they could fix it, and they reached Genzan safely. And then after that, they went on with the flotilla. In Genzan, military transports on which ground military units stayed on. Far Eastern Cossack Group of General Glebov and the Uralo-Yegersky Detachment of General Dmitry Lebedev. Total up to 4,000 people with families. So these two groups stayed on in Genzan, and then they joined a Russian colony in Shanghai later on. One more picture from Marina. Okay, maybe still here. So, as I said, you can see the route from Vladivostok to Pasiet, and south to Genzan, and south to Shanghai. And there was a heavy storm on this leg between Genzan and Shanghai. And one ship, Lieutenant Didimov, was lost on this leg here on the way to Shanghai. So this was the first loss which they suffered. 80 people were lost. So 17 ships of the Stark's flotilla were divided in 4 divisions, and so on the 23rd of November, they went to the port of Fuzan, this one. On November 21st, 17 ships of the flotilla, which were divided now in 4 divisions, left Genzan, I'm sorry. So by this time, there were going on negotiations about the fate of the flotilla by the Rear Admiral Dudarov, who was the former representative of Russian Empire in Tokyo. So General Dudarov was doing these negotiations with different representatives of different countries, including the American representative. And he said that this will be the only opportunity to get to some American port. So the closest port which they could reach was Manila in Philippines, because Philippines was then part of American territory then. So the only opportunity for them was to get to Manila, because neither Japan, who occupied Korea, nor Shanghai, nor Chinese authorities wanted to keep the flotilla. Okay, so during their stay in Shanghai, which was several weeks, they had to get some coal, and also they didn't have enough money for food anymore. So Admiral Stark had to sell some rifles which they had, or some other guns which they had on board. And even if it was not exactly allowed by the Chinese authorities, but he had to manage this somehow. So they were in Shanghai between December 6 of 1922 and January 10, 1923. On January 10, 1923, 12 ships of the Siberian flotilla organized into 3 divisions left Shanghai. Heavy storm disrupted the journey to the Philippine Islands. So we can see these rough waters here, and this is presumably Tataria, on which the Kolosoff family was traveling. So we see how it happened to them. On January 16, 1923, one of the ships, Ajax, ran aground near Pescador Islands and started to sink. The gunboat Farvater tried to rescue its crew, but they could not rescue all of them. They only managed to get 7 people, and 30-something perished. So this is the unique reproduction of the picture, which was painting a watercolor, which was done by Boris Ebert, one of the people who was one of the officers of the Siberian flotilla, who later came to San Francisco in 1925. So we don't know where this painting, we don't know its whereabouts now. And so it was William and Marina Kast who preserved this color reproduction in their documents and their papers, so we can see how it looks. So we are still trying to find this original. If so, we will be grateful for any clues about its whereabouts. Okay, so this is the location where Ajax sank, which was not far from Formosa. So the main area of the storm was here, so on the way from Shanghai to Manila. So after this accident with Ajax, two ships, Magnit and Farvarder, had to go to Formosa to get some coal and also for some repairs, some small repairs. So these are the photos from Formosa done in January 1923, while these two ships made a stop in Formosa, now Taiwan. So this is Magnit in Formosa. We can see the name of the ship here on its side. And this is Farvater. So we can see it on the rings, safety rings. Okay, so by January 24, 1923, Diomede, the flagship of Admiral Stark, and 6 other ships reached the village Bolinao on the island of Luzon in the Philippines. They were met by the torpedo boat number 213, American torpedo boat. And then, so on January 25th, 1923, these 7 ships left Bolinao, and on the next day, January 26th, they arrived at the quarantine station in Mariveles Bay. Other four ships, Magnit, Farvater, and also 2 more by Cullen Paris, who also did some repairs, arrived there later, by February 1st, 1923. Okay, so this is the Kolosoff family in the Philippines. So we can see their children. And there is Marina, little Marina, her mom Kira, and then her husband, and then Igor Kolosoff, cadet, and then their mom, Maria Leontievna, the hero here, and Andrei Ivanovich Kolosoff, and then the girls, boys, younger boys. This is Oleg, Anatoly, and I presume these are Natalia, Milica, and Leah. And this is the brother of Svinsitsky. I guess that this photo was also taken in the quiet waters of Philippines. So we see these ladies, and presumably this is Batalea. And then next photo, again, we see Kira and her daughter Marina. So presumably this is Philippines already, because they are sitting so quietly and it's quite warm, so I suppose it's already in Philippines. Okay, so they stayed in Philippines for about 4 months. Admiral Stark was trying to get some transport for them, to get them to the United States, to the main part of the United States. And finally, he reached agreement with the help of the General Wood, the governor of Philippines. And in April, there was some news from the US that USAT Merritt, US Army Transport Merritt, will be coming to get them in May. During this time in Philippines, so there were arranged some classes for the children because they were around 20-something children. So some classes for them were arranged, both in Russian by their relatives, Russian by the Russian colony, this Russian group, and also in English. So USAT Merritt arrived in May, and they started their journey on the 24th of May. So this is from the diary of Kolosoff. May 24 at 2 p.m., Transport Merritt with the ranks of the flotilla and their families was taken on board, and it left Olongapa to America via Nagasaki. However, due to some misunderstandings that arose in these first days, Captain of the Merritt Fuller decided to change part of the crew. So the ship continued to remain in Philippine waters, and finally it went towards Nagasaki only on the night of May 28. June 1st, 1923, Merritt arrived in the Japanese port of Nagasaki, where the coal was loaded. Also, 3 members of Siberian flotilla joined the group, Kritsky and his wife, and Yushchenko. June 4th, 1923, Merritt left Nagasaki in the direction of the Hawaiian Islands. From this time, for passengers, English lessons were organized, which were taught by American officers. June 20, 1923, at about 8 a.m., Merritt approached the pier in Honolulu, where they were greeted by a military band. They spent a few days in Honolulu. They had tours around, and they were greeted everywhere. So then there was the last leg of their long journey between Honolulu and San Francisco. They approached the San Francisco Bay right before July 1st, as was planned, because of this immigration quota thing. So on July 1st, 1923, the long voyage was completed. From the diary of Kolosoff, at about 9 a.m. on July 1st, the floating lighthouse at the entrance of the bay appeared from the fog. So San Francisco fog was meeting them, greeting them. Not far from him, a pilot motor sailing yacht was sailing. The pilot came up to us and then led us. Around 10 a.m., having passed all sorts of entrances, we entered into San Francisco Bay and anchored. The sun was shining, but it was windy. Official boats approached us: police, cemetery, and customs. Then later on, General Hiskanin, who was appointed by Admiral Stark as the head of this group, wrote to Admiral Stark, "We arrived in San Francisco on July 1st, but only on July 2nd we were quartered at the barracks at Fort McDowell on Angel Island." So then, as Masha said, there was a special procedure when they were checked. And then there was a long period of adaptation into life in America. So I have now a few more things to say. So first of all, I would like to greet Tatiana Savatiev, who is with us today. Her father, Timofey Mikhailovich Savatiev, as a young man, was unmarried. He was a Mur Kazakh. I'm sorry, I can't tell you much more today. So I just wanted to mention that in 1985, there was a publication in the California History Journal, which claimed to be the first account of Siberian flotilla journey. And this was probably the first account in English which was published. So it was called From Golden Horn to Golden Gate by Shimkin. On the first page of this article, you see this photo, and it says that this is Stepan Savin in Kazakh uniform, and the photo was provided to the authors by Safronov. But actually, I just recently discovered that this was the wrong caption, and this is actually Timofey Mikhailovich Savatiev. So I just wanted to let know. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if Shimkin, the author, is still around, but yeah, I just wanted to tell you this. And then, so this is the photo of the Didenko family. I just, a month ago, I met Boris Didenko, and this was just so fortunate. This was done through Father Philip of Christ the Savior Church. This was a surprise call. So Boris Didenko was very kind in allowing me to look at his family photos. So the 5 members of his family were also married. His grandfather, Evgeny Grigorievich Didenko, his wife Dora Alexandrovna, Boris's father Arkady Evgenyevich Didenko, and his 2 brothers. So this is Evgeny and Alexander. So both Arkady and Evgeny were in the Naval Academy in Vladivostok, and they were both on the training ships Magnet. So they were both together with Igor Kolosoff on the same Magnet and Michael Podimatopoulos, both members of the Kolosoff clan. So I will continue research into the story of this family, Didenko, and hope to make some presentation later on. And finally, so I also wanted to say a few words about Zhenya, our lovely Zhenya. So Zhenya is shown here in 2018 at the conference in our premises with Anna Kiryushkin, who also grew up in San Francisco, like Zhenya, in this Russian community. So Zhenya Bailey infected all of us here with this virus of Merritt exploration and Siberian flotilla exploration. So I wanted to read the message which she sent me yesterday. I want to express my gratitude to Margarita Minyalenko, Yves Franquien, Lada, and other members of the Russian Museum for all of your effort to help celebrate the 100th-year anniversary of the arrival of 526 Russian refugees on Angel Island on July 1st, 1923. Escaping the ruthless Bolshevik menace, these souls gave up all that was near and dear to them. My parents, Pavel and Maria Nikolenko, or Nikolenko in Russian, were members of this group. Although I'm unable to attend the upcoming celebration physically, Zhenya will be 100 years old on 1st of November, I will be there with you in spirit. Sincerely, Evgenia Nikolenko Bailey. Also, I wanted to draw your attention that we made together with Zhenya a poster about her father, which you can see in the corridor, the blue one. And also, thanks to Margarita, we did two posters about Siberian flotilla and USAT Merritt refugees. So also, one more thing. So when you enter our museum, you can see a large photo of the celebration of the 10th anniversary of USAT Merritt arrival. And if any of you can recognize your relatives or ancestors in it, please write down. Also, there is a temporary exhibition of the materials, Kolosoff materials, which you can see at the entrance. And I will be grateful for any other materials which you can provide, any of you, about this story to our museum. Thank you.
I wanted to invite Dr. Margarita to the podium. Since 2008, we have been organizing charity balls in different places. We started in Los Angeles. Actually, we had a charity ball, the 5th one, in Los Angeles on May 13th of this year. We had been organizing since together about 11 charity balls, in Ireland, Dublin, in San Francisco, in London, and This year we had our 11th ball in Los Angeles, and we have sponsored the Russian Children's Endowment Society, and also we sponsored a Russian museum in San Francisco. And I wanted to hand over the check.
Oh,
Yes.
so big.
Yeah, well, yeah. This is the actual check. This one I wanted to take a picture with you, Doctor, so we could have it for our
Historical photo?
yeah, for the please like that.
Adjusting, but never learned English. I knew that from my time here in the 1940s. But the church was extremely important, solidifying people's able to continue under very adverse circumstances. So in this museum, since 1948, when it was founded, has been a real treasure. And we have such a dedicated group of people that have come recently come from the Russian Federation, people who have been here for many, many years. And they're the descendants of the people that I've met when I was 10 years old. I was here in 1942. I remember them, and we could toast to them for the wonderful way they maintained their life in San Francisco and the Bay Area.